of the things that actually ends up happening is, you know, you have to sort of, like you said, it's a make or break at this point. You have to
Yeah.
now be more intentional with how your economy performs, what you invest in, and how you
Hmm.
create that favorable environment. So
Yeah.
what this basically then does is it basically pushes the responsibility of paying that loan to the incoming generation, right? Or the future generation, so to say.
Hmm.
How sure are we that the policies that the government is going to introduce will work? Because, truthfully speaking, you never know if they work or they won't work. So, is debt restructuring as good as we are making it seem?
I would argue. I would argue that it's a two-way thing. It's a case of whether it's really about. So like how here in the US when you get a car, after you pay a certain amount of money, if you financed it via a bank, you can apply to refinance it, right? It might be at a lower interest rate, it might be you paying lower premiums on a monthly basis because you've paid the majority of it, which is good for you as a person that got the car or financed the home, financed whatever that you need. It's the same case with like a debt restructuring deal, right? Yes, we do push it towards payments to the future generations, but what is happening now is that the economy is not doing good, right? And the economy is struggling. The question I'll be asking, the president, I will be asking the Minister of Finance is what policies are they going to put in place to ensure that these premiums that we are going to skip for the next 3 years will be sustained over the long run and make sure the next children that are, people that are being born, our generation, doesn't have to face worse consequences. Because what happens after 3 years? In that Wapasa, this 3 year payment gap period, it's a time for them to compound on how much money they can return to the investors. Like a lot of people don't see it like this, but I see Zambia, I see Africa as a business. And every business that can't sustain itself debt wise and can't pay back its investors is a failing business. So
True.
it's about, changing the internal management of structures. Like, how are they going to use data from the previous governments? How did the previous governments perform when they got a debt restructuring deal or any other African government? What policies did they put in? Did they work or did they not work? Because we have a lot of case studies that they can point to in terms of debt restructuring. Because even the US itself has a lot of debt. Like, yes, I get it, debt. The US is probably one of the worst borrowers. They have like a
Yeah,
trillion and something.
trillions. Yeah.
Yeah, they owe trillions to investors, and not just like foreign entities. It's actually citizens themselves. But they have a way of paying them back. Their treasury bills or the bond markets. It's about how exactly is the government going to do that by putting in policies that will allow businesses to thrive. If businesses thrived on a local scale, you would have more investors coming into the country. More people would want to invest into, the mining sector. They'd want to invest in the agricultural sector and whatnot. So yeah, it seems bad because we're pushing it forward, but at the same time, it's about what we do in the next 3 years before we actually make the first payment. Can we make the first payment? Can we make the second payment without causing any harm to, the next generation that comes?
Yeah, I was sort of looking at it because I'm not sure if you're familiar with a very brilliant economist, a Zambian economist by the name of Dambisa Moyo.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I was reading her book. Gosh, I've forgotten the title of the book.
debt aid.
Dead age.
There you
Yeah.
go. But she has such brilliant advice and information that she has to share with regards to just how Africa and
Hmm.
aid isn't really helping us in any way.
Yeah.
And I understand debt cancellation might not be the best way of going about it, but we really need to have a conversation about the debt that we have. And I'm just
Hmm.
hoping the current government has it figured out in terms of just the investments that they're going to do in the next few years to make sure that the deal goes according to plan.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good observation. And I really like Dambesa's book because it points out to like real time things that actually have happened in the African continent when it comes to aid. But
Yeah.
um, there has to be a clear distinction between aid and investment. That's why I think a lot of people are not looking at it in a more realistic light. Debt restructuring deals with the government needing to pay back investors. It's not primarily like aid. I think in the context of Dambisa, I might misquote her, and please correct me if I do. What she was trying to highlight was, aid that is tied to, especially to specific things. Like they give you aid and say, okay, you're going to spend this much money on a female empowerment camp, right? That
Yeah.
that money could have been more useful if the government invested it in maybe building classrooms somewhere or doing something like that. Like, y- I don't know if you get what I mean, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
yeah, there's that distinction between aid and debt. Debt is like the government is owing on equity that they got from like people that invested in the country. They are buying shares in the Zambian government. They are interested in the Eurobond. They keep pointing back because the most popular thing and the most obvious thing people look to, the treasury bills, the treasury bonds that people are invested in. How exactly is the government going to return money to those investors while achieving their investment objectives? It is going to be key going forward. Like aid will continue coming. There's a lot of agencies that are keen on helping, low income countries thrive. And also some of the projects have to be careful. If they get aid, let them structure it in a way that if they're directing money towards school infrastructure, there has to be a workaround where the government can maybe gain revenue from the infrastructure that they just built, you
Yeah.
know yeah, like I get the whole concept of free education, but there has to be some incentives in some way or another where the government gains some revenue.
True. I think the actual analogy that Dambisa uses is if if there's a local fisherman, right, and this
Yeah,
fisherman, no, I think she uses an analogy of a guy making a mosquito net. You know,
yeah.
he let's say he makes one mosquito net a day, and then company X comes and offers to say we're going to donate 50 mosquito nets. Now that guy has basically run out of business because you've flooded his market with free
Hmm.
mosquito nets. So her argument is instead of donating those mosquito nets, let's
Hmm.
empower that guy to have the capacity of making even more so that
More mosquitoes. Yeah,
that sort of thing. But anyway,
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
pivot from that, um any aspirations to go into government, to stand for any positions, to actually implement these brilliant ideas that you're sharing with us right now?
that's a good question. So,
Mhm.
in reality, I am a bit of in a crossroad, to be honest. I have thought about going into government. I think at some point, maybe I might want to take up a role as Minister of Finance and Technology, or maybe actually compete for presidency if things align properly.
Right.
But that's because my aspiration is to run a hedge fund in Zambia, and I
Mm.
see Zambia as a potential fund, like getting investors into the country to spur economic growth. So that would be the reason I run for presidency, because if you empower a country and you have a very successful, thriving business, you'd have less poor people, reduce the poverty levels in the country. But those are my some of my aspirations. I'd say I would want to run for presidency maybe in the next 15 to 20 years. I would say when I grow my skills overall and get to understand more of what governance works like in the context of like African politics. But short term, it's probably just starting my own business, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah.
Another pivot.
Hmm.
It's Easter time. How do you spend your Easter, you know, Easter holidays? I'm pretty sure you grew up Christian. I mean, Zambia
Yep.
is a Christian nation. How
Yep.
how do you think that has changed over time coming to the US, gaining more knowledge, learning more about certain things? As a scientist, I'm speaking
Yep.
as
This
a
nigga is
I'm
trying to get me canceled, dog.
nah. I'm speaking as a as a person who does so much science, and I
Hmm.
interact with so many people who are in these spaces, and I'm always curious to know and
Hmm.
find out how they view these things. I think I was having a
Hmm.
conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about um I think I was on a hike and we found like this big rock, and I was like, oh wow, God is good. Like
Yeah.
like this is massive, and they're like, you think so? They went on this tangent about how they think, whatever, you know, nature in itself just being
Hmm.
massive. And to me, yeah, like I said, scientific reasoning always
Hmm.
intrigues me. So, what's your
Yeah.
viewpoint on those issues and those matters?
So that's a really good question. From having grown up in, I grew up in a very religious setting. We all did as Zambians. We were all shoved into the corner of Uyu nem Christo. Okay, everyone is a Christian by virtue of being born a Zambian, and this comes from inception of early on as a child. We all grow up with the same narrative. But as I as I have grown, and this started way back before I even came to the US, I started questioning a lot of my religious beliefs, whether it was based on truth or based on facts. It was just based on people's opinions about what religion is like you know.
Hmm.
And despite having been super religious myself at a point, I got to a point where I took myself away from what I believe in and looked at it and questioned, like, okay, how exactly has religion impacted people around me? And how exactly has religion impacted, the country at large? I feel I feel much as I believe in God, just to be clear, I do believe in God. I believe in the idea that there is, a supreme being that exists beyond what we can comprehend. In order for this whole universe to exist, it just didn't happen, despite whatever Big Bang theory would have to come up with and whatnot. There has to be a start point to anything, like the Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So from from questioning my religious standpoints, I started picking out what was useful and what was not useful for me. Religion doesn't have the full truth of what life is like. If the Bible says, um, learn to respect your mother, honor your mother and your father. Uh, a lot of people will just take it as grains, but you ask yourself, why is that important? Well, it's important for you because it determines how you turn out as a person. Your parents play a pivotal role in who you are and who they shape who you become in the future as a person. So, despite what I've learned from science, I believe in the identity of God, but I've acknowledged the dangerous impacts that religion has in Zambia. A lot of people are not realistic. One, they base everything on spirituality when it is actually a physical issue. Like you find Muntu alina epilepsy amagwa kunyu. No, uyu ana ana
Niwambuya
demon.
bake.
Mwambuya wake.
Madimo,
Mm.
yeah, weird.
Like like dog, there's this whole thing of the drought, for example. A lot of people will say, no, Mulungu is upset with Zambia. Bro, it's climate change. It's explainable. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of science that you can back together with religion. You don't have to like completely just separate. You can separate the two. They're two separate entities. One is factual, the other is based on more of an emotional and a psychological standpoint. So I see things for what they are. When it comes to science, if something is explainable by science, for me, it's a scientific fact. Climate change is happening. That's why we have a drought. It's got nothing to do with God being angry with the president, God being angry with Zambians. It's got nothing to do with anything. The same as when people had the AIDS pandemic. Uh, People would come up with different excuses about no, Banfriti, they've entered the family, they're killing people. People were dying because there was an outbreak of a pandemic, and there's a disease that is spreading. Science came up with a solution. We don't know what inspired the people to come up with the idea. It could have come from God for all we care. But yeah, there's that. I'm just the main point I'm trying to say is that I look at religion from an aspect of yes, there are religious views, but there are also stupid religious views, and some things are not true. You can't just always base your things on no, church, this and that. Half of the time, a lot of people who base themselves entirely on religion are hypocrites. I've been one myself. I know it. Like
You were the chairperson for all we care.
exactly, exactly, exactly. As a chairperson for Scripture Union, I know some of the things I did and some of the things I thought about some people. Like, it's not wrong to see yourself as a human and have your religious beliefs, but question your religious beliefs just as much as an African child. And then coming to being African, I also believe, just as much as there's the white man's religion that they've taught us, that we all grew up in, that our culture still plays a pivotal role in who we are today, even as a scientist. Like for me, I still believe in the idea that we had our own ways of doing things way before the white settlers came in, and those determined our day-to-day lives as well as interactions with our ancestral worship. So I found myself in a place where I have three areas of my life that, put me together. So I look at science, I look at being African, and I look at some aspects of, a religion. It can be Christianity or Islam for all I care. I pick out what is good for me.
Why do you
Yeah,
think
and
Africa is the most impacted with religion?
Uh, wow, that's a very complex question. It's a very good question. Um, you'd have to go back to first the idea of why do we have religion in Africa in the first place. Yes, the British came with the idea of spreading religion, but they also had their inner motives. Some of these, explorers, David Livingstone and whatnot, I hope they rename Livingstone Town to Monsieur Tunya. I'll be the happiest one day.
I swear. Please let's stop saying we're going to Victoria Falls.
Yeah.
Let's stop saying we're going to Mosotuni.
Exactly. Some of these explorers came with the guises of bringing their morality to the continent, and at the same time, it covered our people's judgment of what an enemy and a friend looked like, right? Just after the explorers came in with the idea of sharing religion, they were mapping out what areas of the continent had resources, and using that knowledge, Western civilization was able to come up with a way to take away our resources for hundreds of years. So when it comes down to how I think religion impacts us, it makes us stupid. One, it makes us heavily dependent, heavily focused on a heavenly goal other than trying to enrich ourselves while we're still here on earth. Like it's about now. Have you been to heaven before? No, you haven't. It's about now. You get one shot at life. Whatever comes after that, it's up to you and whatever you believe in. And
Jackson,
also it
Just
make and also it makes most people poor. Bro, there's no way you have a 50 quarter. The only money you have, your pastor tells you give offering because you believe, and then you go and starve at home.
hmm
yeah, just to pivot, I mean, to add on that.
Yeah,
I feel like it's it's more of the interpretation of. I mean, I'm a believer. I'm a
yeah,
Christian. I believe in the Bible, but the way it was presented to us is what I have a problem with. And
yeah,
unfortunately, majority of our people back home, they they are so rigid in their thinking. They don't want to change. Don't want to accept that the way it was presented is wrong. It
yeah,
was wrong. So I'm here
yeah,
to tell you that it was wrong. So
yeah,
the way we preach the word and understand it, it shouldn't come from the ignorant point of view.
yeah,
Because even like you look at the current situations that science is able to explain, right?
yeah.
They were foretold in the Bible. It's just that we are not sharp enough to comprehend some of these things that were foretold.
Mm-hmm,
You know, the Bible clearly stated the devil is very cunning.
mm-hmm.
There'll be somebody that is going to come and convince you otherwise that you're not worthy and all that stuff. All this is stipulated in the Bible, but we
Yeah.
oversee it. We can't understand it because the devil himself came to us and then told us in the form of I don't wanna I don't wanna sound controversial,
Don't
but
say it, don't say it.
So yes, no, like for me, I believe in the Bible, right? But it's
Yeah,
just the way it was presented to us. And Africans,
yeah,
please
yeah,
learn to question things. Do not always
yeah,
take things as gospel. Always
yeah,
ask yourself, even the people, like if you follow the Bible and you read the people in the Bible, or the prophets, and they question things. The
yeah,
greatest man in the Bible, for me, the best prophet ever, Elijah. Whenever they told him something, he would question that. He said,
yeah,
why? No, you are bringing this, why? Me,
yeah,
I believe in this. Explain to me why you think that is right. Always
yeah,
question. We have multiple examples in the Bible. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were told to bow. They were like, why?
yeah,
So just question everything. Do not always take things as gospel. Always
yeah,
question these things.
yeah.
The answers are there.
Yeah, that's true. And adding on to Jackson's point, it's also a matter of reading text and applying it in real context, right? Like not everything has to be entirely hogwash about witchcraft, wizardry, and whatnot. Some of these things you just read it with a grain of salt and apply it in a way that is most logical. Because half of the pastors, and then yeah, this one, half of the pastors in the country should not even be pastors. Now, some
Yeah.
of these people have not had any Bible school training where they actually taught them to interpret and accurately explain what the Bible means to people. That's why we have a lot of false prophets in these countries, people who are ripping off people for money in churches and whatnot, and even false prophets that ended up playing a role in influencing the country in terms of politics with seen a whole lot of things about no, God gave me this vision, this person is going to win,
Yeah.
this person is going to lose. Like it's that where there's now no clear separation between the church and the state. I think Zambia would be better placed if at some point we actually got to separate the state from this entire idea of the state and the church are the same. Those are two different entities. Yes, they can coexist. We share some values between, swearing in a person using the Bible and whatnot. Those are symbolisms. They're not entirely, it's not like it's a factual thing. It's a symbolism for the people taking an oath to take up office and whatnot. But that shouldn't be a major determinant that people use to see themselves as a country, as a person, like, bro, these religious things will change over time. Look at how the Catholic Church is evolving over time. Some of the things that you're not accepting now will be acceptable in 10 years. Are you just going to go with it or you're going to question why are we accepting it now?
Yeah.
In addition, I feel like what you guys have said about is really true, and just having a curious mind and not just accepting everything as you're given would take you a long way. Again,
Yep.
as a scientist, some of the best scientists to have ever existed, Albert Einstein, Sir Isaac Newton, question things. Why did this apple fall? What's making it fall?
Yep.
Trying to understand on your own, and not just accepting what's already been laid out there would take you a long way.
Yep.
And so those were really good nuggets. I'm not sure if I have any other questions, but gosh, I feel like there's so much that we could have talked about, and maybe we should do a part two, Martin. What do you think?
I I would be down to do a part two. If you lads want to have a part two, just send me a text whenever and we can always make a part two.
Most deaf, and I'll just say this episode was brought to you by Mango Zambia. I know Jackson doesn't even know this, but we have partnered with an e-commerce company in Zambia that more or less works like Amazon,
Hmm.
uh, eBay, you name it. So they basically have an app and a website where they have different sellers, different people who sell their stuff, mostly clothing, non-perishables. So you just basically go to this app or website, you find whatever you want, clothing, shoes, you know, and you purchase it, and their rates are affordable. They have different shipping options. If you want it the same day, they'll deliver it. If you want it in 2 weeks, the shipping is
Hmm.
even cheaper. It's even as low as 20 kwacha.
Nice.
So it's really a game changer in Zambia, and I would urge anyone watching it to give it a shot and leave a review. So, Martin, it's been amazing having you here. I've learned so much from your journey. Deeply inspired. As always, I'm always learning something new from the podcast every day. I'll leave Jackson to close us off.
Yeah, yeah. I don't wanna be like the selfish dude. So I'll leave the closing remarks to Matthew. If there's anything you just want to leave the people with, of course, there's
Yep.
gonna be a part two. People should expect a part two. We'll definitely schedule that. But if there's any closing remarks, something you just want to leave people with as they end this episode.
Yep. So, just to close off for a lot of people that you've come to this end of the podcast. First of all, congratulations to both of you on your new partnership, and thank you as well for having me on. It was a great honor. And for people listening out there, I would say I know it is hard and I know it is difficult as an African child to see yourself getting anywhere with like limited resources, limited almost anything. Like anything, you could pick anything in your life and it seems to be working against you. It could be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your partners, it could be your own education and you might question it, but you have to understand is that life is a purpose driven thing. It's a machine that you constantly need to oil up and constantly need to change. You need to be able to adapt regardless of what the circumstances like, whether it is good, whether it is bad. You just need to forge ahead, keep your head high, and close your ears off sometimes. I know there's people that are going to whisper and discourage you on your journey as you go on, especially for students. You just need to go forward. Even in your business, the same thing. Focus on what your goal is and how you can better yourself to take yourself closer to your goals as a person. So yeah, it's been me, your boy Martin, the King of Africa, and I hope to see you guys on part two.
Yes, sir.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And if you come this far, thank you so much. Martin, we really appreciate you. And yeah, at this point, I'm going to stop recording. And
Yes,
deuces.
sir.